get going. So the STEM coaches asked if I would help present on STEM in CTE. So I know a lot of times when we do trainings, we have kind of broad trainings about how they can be incorporated, and it's never really specific. And I know a lot of times when I was in a lot of the different trainings, I felt like it didn't quite pertain to me. So the purpose of this goal is, or the purpose of this PD is really to try to kind of help you guys as a whole, not you too, but as a whole, the CTE world, see how STEM can be incorporated within their content area. The good thing about STEM, I think, is when it comes to CTE, is a lot of our curriculum is actually already written that way. The only thing missing is kind of that tying together piece of it being written as a PBL style thing. But you know, the major goal of CTE and a lot of the classes, even at the middle level, is getting that real world hands-on experience, and that's a lot of times the focus of going into the STEM program. So I don't think it's going to be a far-fetched when you try to think about like what are some of the lessons I do, or some of the topics I cover, and how can I make sure that they are, you know, kind of hitting within the STEM way of learning. So the first thing that I want to do you guys see my screen? Okay. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna go into presentation mode because it just makes things weird, I think. On a scale of 1 to 5, how confident do you feel like you are with delivering STEM lessons? You can type it, you can hold your finger up, whichever.
I don't know. It's tough. Yeah, I'd probably say 2 or 3. I don't know.
2 or 3? Okay. All right. So what I'm going to kind of do, and the only reason I really asked that was because I don't want everybody to say a 5 and then be like, I already know all of these things. You know, so what I'm going to do is just kind of go over some of the core parts of STEM in CTE, and then I really wanted to give you guys, and this is where it was going to be nice to have a much broader group, but try to think about something that we all have in common and what we could do kind of throughout the school, throughout CTE, that we could encompass together and kind of build on a lesson. So I'm going to go to the next one, and basically just how can I easily incorporate STEM within my CTE classes? So the way to do this is to make sure that when you're developing your lessons and your units, you're kind of putting problem-based learning as the mode in which you'll deliver that information. Trying to make sure that you are incorporating the engineer's design cycle, tying it back to the real world, having the students solve a problem, and that once again goes back to tying it back to the real world, allowing them to collaborate. So we know that, you know, years ago, the way that we learned was we put the students in rows, the teacher taught, the students listened, they took notes, and we know that that's not the way that we do that now. So, you know, really giving the students the time to collaborate together, but it's meaningful and it's purposeful collaboration. So it's making sure that we're putting them into learning communities where they actually have a task, and so, or they have a role, and so their job is to be the leader, or their job is to be the recorder. You know, so depending on the project or the style that you're doing, you may have different roles that the students play within that particular unit or that topic, but it gives them a responsibility, and it kind of helps them to become more in charge of their learning, but also making sure that the whole group has a task and it's not one person doing everything, because that's not collaboration. And then also making sure that you collaborate and that you make connections with other people in other content areas. And so I think that for teachers is sometimes the hardest thing to do. And it takes a lot of forward planning, but it's one of the best things that we can do for the students, because it means that they're seeing that you're not a silo. You know, if you're teaching business, obviously that can go into all of the different content areas. You know, you're teaching them kind of the skill to really build that foundation going into the workforce, whether it's in a math related field or whether it's in a science or whether it's in a music related field. So, you know, the world of agriculture seems like it's this one little silo, but really everybody is affected by agriculture, and agriculture affects a lot of different industries along the way. So I talked about incorporating the engineer's design cycle. So I just put these up on the screen. Each school has a different one. So it looks like yours would start where you are, where you had that empathy, which I think that goes back to that real world problem, real world situations and trying to solve a problem. We're always seeing that there's a need for something, and then trying to figure out how can we fix that. And then you come up with your ideas, you ask questions, then you start designing the product that you may want to create. You get feedback, which is that part of that reflection piece. And then you create it, and then you just keep going through it. So it's a cycle. So you can, I mean, the first thing you make is never going to be perfect. Even when you've made your last prototype or your last creation, there can always be second and third and fourth versions of things. So the whole point of the engineer's design cycle is that the students are asking questions, they're making plans, they're designing, they're creating, but they're reflecting, and then they're making those changes. And so no matter what cycle you look at, this is going to definitely be the major component of this. I taught STEM for, I think, 5 years. I taught it with a combination of IB. So the way that I taught it was more along the IB design route. So my STEM students kind of got both worlds. They got the engineer's design cycle, and then they also got the IB design cycle. And one of the things we did was kind of looked at both design cycles and how are they similar and how are they different. And it doesn't matter what design cycle you look at, it's the same things. Ask questions, make a design, make your creation, reflect on that, and make the changes that you need. And it just goes around and around. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of put that up there so that you guys had a visual of going back to that engineer's design cycle. I'm sure it's posted probably around your school. So what makes a successful PBL? So when we talk about STEM, a lot of times it's kind of hand in hand. All right, they teach STEM, which means they're going to teach in the PBL format. It doesn't mean that everything is going to be taught in a PBL way. It's definitely a mindset shift. If you've never taught a PBL, I'm not going to lie, you're not going to walk away from here today being like, all right, I'm going to go do all my lessons in a PBL format. But hopefully it will at least get you thinking, how can I start making that shift? The way that I have always thought of it, and it could be wrong, it worked for me, and it's kind of how, when we had other teachers coming into IB, how I told them that I thought worked well is, what is the end product? What are you trying to do for the students? What are they trying to learn? What is the outcome that you're wanting them to have? And so when you start with the end product and then you start working your way backwards, I personally think it helps. You guys know your curriculum, you know the standards that they're needing to learn, and you know the standards that you're needing to teach. So what can I do that's fun? What can I do that's hands-on? What can I do that's engaging and authentic? And it's going to challenge them. And along the way, they're going to learn all of these things. One of the biggest parts of a PBL from experience is actually the planning component. But if you plan it correctly, it's smooth sailing for the most part when you're actually going through the project. So instead of every day you're teaching the students a lesson and then they do a worksheet, or you teach them for 20 minutes and then they do a hands-on activity for 10 or 15 minutes or something like that, you're more or less, you're coming up with, what are all of the things that I need them to learn? And as they're going through this project, I'm going to give them this piece of information and we're going to learn this real quick. And then they're going to be able to immediately apply it. So, you're thinking about, like, if I was to sit there and go through, it's kind of like a learning by doing. So if we're trying to, I don't know, change the oil in a car, and my dad's sitting there and he's like, all right, step 1, step 2, step 3, and he's going through all these on a board and just pointing them all out. It maybe I can't go out there and immediately change the oil in a car, but if I'm out there and he's doing that and I'm, going through the steps with him, it's a lot easier to learn it that way. And so that's kind of the process of the STEM way, is you're being able to kind of go along and learn it when you need it. Chances are, if you're learning it when you need the information, it's going to stick with you a lot more versus learning it and then a week later applying it or being like, oh, I remember we did talk about that. So what makes a PBL successful? Encouraging collaboration, and this is definitely between the teachers and the students. I talked about that a little bit earlier. Collaboration is definitely a big part of STEM, and it's a big part of just a PBL unit in general. You definitely don't want students working by themselves. There are the students that do like to do that, but the whole point is two minds are better than one kind of a thing. And you may think of something in a totally different way than what I would have thought about it. And so having different people, especially when you're talking about solving problems and coming up with designs and creations and building, it's a lot better to be able to have a partner or even a group be able to do this together, as long as they're run properly. This isn't just group work where you're like, all right, just get this project done, whoever gets it done, great, everybody else can get credit. That's not the point of this. It's to give everybody a task and give everybody a responsibility and a goal that they need to complete and bring to the group. It's not, all right, you do the first section, I'll do the second section, and then we'll put them together. It's not that either. It's working through the process together. I think successful PBLs have a cross-curricular focus. I talked about this earlier. When I'm thinking about a real world problem, it's hardly ever going to just involve one content or one thing. You're thinking about a technological issue, you've got a whole bunch of areas that are going to be involved in that. And it's going to, I may have to come up with some sort of literacy material to be able to understand how to operate the machine. I may need to get a computer scientist in there to help me code it. I may need to get a machinist to help me build it. I may need to get a business person in here to help me market it. Like, there's all different areas that need to go into solving a problem. So if you do that with the students now, starting, early on and even before middle school, they start seeing the connection on how everything is connected and how it's not just, if I'm a mathematician, I don't have to worry about anything else, because that's not true. There's a lot to every aspect of the world. Making sure that it's relevant to the students now and for the future. I remember as a kid sitting in geometry and, they're like throwing these angles at you and, whatever else. I really honestly don't even remember a whole lot from geometry, but I loved math until that point. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, finally just raised my hand and I was like, when am I ever going to need to know this? And it was really hard for me to make the connection and be able to apply myself in that class, because I just couldn't make the connection. And then dang if I didn't become a homeowner. And I'm like, oh my God, I use geometry all the time, like trying to figure out the distance between here and there, or the angles that I want to place things, or when we're, building something around the house. Like, I'm like, dude, if you would have just said that from the beginning, it would have been so much easier to be able to make that application. And then having that application and making sure that you're letting the students see the relevance of what they're learning definitely is going to help to keep them, keeping it authentic, keeping them engaged, and then also making it challenging for them. Typically with a problem-based learning, the project itself, it makes up the unit. So I talked about a little bit earlier on when we were first looking at this slide, talking about how you give the information along the way. So a lot of times when you are doing a project, you start out with a problem and you're like, all right, guys, like, here is the problem. And it could be a legit real problem right now. It could be something that you've made up, but it seems like it's real, or it's definitely something that could happen. It may be, far-fetched, or kind of, it could be a superhero thing, or, zombies taking over the world, something that the students like right now, but it's still something that seems like it's a real world application. And then as you're going through the project and you give them their different tasks and the things that they would need to do, or their timeline or something like that, and as they get to each next section, that's when you would give them the information that they would need. And so the next thing is that, and this is one, honestly, when I taught STEM, it wasn't one of the biggest pushes. It's one thing that I've kind of heard throughout the last couple of years about STEM is promoting a partnership within the community. So if you're doing an agricultural project and you're talking about a real world problem, finding that community member that could come in and actually be a guest speaker and really talk about, like, this is a problem, this is what we're trying to do to fix it, or, this is just something that's recently come up. And so now we're having to figure out, how do we shift to account for that? Or bringing business people in, or talking about how, in your entrepreneurship class, bringing somebody in for marketing and having them say, well, here's how we start the process of marketing when we know somebody wants to, rebrand their product or something like that. Here's how we start, and then this is the process we go through. It definitely helps the students see, oh, it's not just teachers telling me I need to know this. This is real people actually using the information I'm learning right now. And then not always, but a lot of times it's going to produce an end product. So typically we think about an end product being a hands-on project, and they walk away with their rocket ship, or they walk away with, their three-dimensional globe, or whatever it would be. That doesn't have to be the case. It could be a code that they've created. It could be a mobile app. It could be a spreadsheet. So it doesn't have to be something where it's in their hand. It's not necessarily a tangible thing, but it is an end product or creation that they're working towards. Do you want me to stop for a second? Y'all have any questions? Okay. I'm gonna keep going. There's not much more to this part of it. So one thing, kind of going back to making sure that we have that connection throughout the disciplines, is trying very hard to make these lessons that you do interdisciplinary. This is another way where you can actually bring in that problem or bring in that real world situation. So if you're, Mr. Soul, you teaching business, maybe you went to a science class, or maybe you went to any of the content areas, and you're like, all right, what are you guys learning? And what's something that like my students could create for you? Maybe it's a business letter, or maybe it's a flyer, or maybe it's a presentation, not necessarily a presentation, but it could be, or maybe it's just kind of giving them a template to use, but having your students practice the skills that they should be learning in your class, but actually tying it back to something that they're doing in their 7th grade classes. I know it's hard when you're talking about interdisciplinary because you don't teach every 7th grade student, but that's okay, because between all of the different contents, the students will hear parts of it or hear enough of it to where they understand what's going on. It's not like they have to do every single piece, but at the end of it, a product is created by all those parts and pieces coming together. And I do think that that's probably one of the hardest things when you're talking about interdisciplinary lessons is, well, we can't do that. Not all of the kids take my class. That's okay, because the kids that aren't taking your class, especially if you get this to be a broad interdisciplinary, the students that aren't taking you are maybe taking, band or music, and they're creating the jingle that's going to go along with your marketing that you're going to create, which is going to go along with the creation or the, new creature they're creating in science. And eventually it all comes together and it makes a product. You always want to have that common focus that cross-references throughout the content. We'll talk a little bit about that later. A lot of times it may be the essential question that you guys have together, and sometimes it's just kind of more of a general topic. It's going to link back to the same problem. So at the very beginning, you guys may say, like, here's our problem, or here's our essential question. Here's how we're going to help to fix that in my class. And then you kind of take what you're teaching them and go back to the problem and the same question that everybody else is going back to, and then they're doing their part as well. And then doing an interdisciplinary lesson gives that holistic view. So I've talked about this a couple of times before, but how can I let my students see the importance and the relevance outside of my 4 walls, and let them see that this is something that they need to know, way down the line later in their learning, or as an adult, or even, tomorrow, or something that they see on the news. So how can I let them see that, the world is bigger than their school right now? And doing interdisciplinary lessons definitely helps to be able to do that, because they can see the connectedness between a lot of the different content areas. All right. So how would I start doing a STEM-based type learning? How would I start doing an interdisciplinary lesson, or a problem-based learning? The first thing that you want to do is identify, especially when you're talking about interdisciplinary, is identify a common focus or identify an overarching theme. So, Mr. Soul, I know you're part of the computer science cohort. So this is what we're talking about a lot is, computer science is not just a class. So what are the overarching themes within computer science that we can fit into a lot of the different program areas? And so you'll do something similar to that when you're doing an interdisciplinary problem-based type lesson. So maybe sustainability is your overarching theme. Okay, we're going to learn that in the 8th grade. So that's going to be, what we want to focus on. How can, or what courses, what subjects can be involved in this? So considering all the aspects of the topic. So when we talk about sustainability, you're thinking, okay, like something that can, that doesn't get used up in a year. But there's a lot more that goes to that. You've got designing and building and planning and coding and fixing. You've got growing or producing, marketing. So when you start thinking about all of the different aspects, you're like, oh, okay, well, this class is tech ed, this class is tech ed, this is computer science, this is agriculture, this is business, this is, family and consumer sciences. And you automatically start thinking, wow, I've just hit all of the content areas. Maybe I can get all of the teachers in my school and we can come up with something together that focuses on sustainability. So then what you want to do is determine those courses, communicate with your team. If you go to them and be like, I have this idea, I think that this project would be really great. And I should have put that as a bullet point. But, maybe you have a project that you really want to do with them. And so from the project that you found, you saw somebody else doing or you heard about, or it popped up in your head, you come up with your overarching theme, you have your project, and then you kind of pitch it to your team. Maybe you guys, I know Northwest used to eat together lunch wise. I don't know if you guys are still doing that right now, but even at lunch, be like, I really was thinking about this project. I think we could all make it work. And then start figuring out like, all right, everybody's in. All right, let's go with this. What other courses could we maybe bring into that? Maybe you guys start small and you just do the, 2 of you or the 3 of you. And then maybe the next one you try to pull in some other encore teachers. Typically, it's a little bit easier to do that because you guys have the same planning. Otherwise, you're kind of having a finagle. If you're trying to do it with your 7th grade teachers, with your 7th grade students, obviously they've got teachers kids when you've got planning. But there's definitely ways to work around that. And so the more comfortable you get with this, then you can start pulling in maybe some core teachers and say, we know that you guys learned this in the 7th grade. How about we try to do a lesson where you've got your major topic, or you talk about sustainability as well. This is the project that we're thinking about. Do you think that you'd like to collaborate with us and do a big interdisciplinary lesson? But if you guys start with just 2 of you, that's a great start, and it helps get your foot in the door, get your feet wet, I guess, with trying to do a lesson like this. The next thing you'll do is try to identify what units you're being taught, or that you're teaching, what units they're teaching, and how this unit will cover this. For me, this unit will cover, like when we're talking about the project, I'll be able to hit on this unit and I'll be able to hit on this unit over here, and just having those kind of laid out and making sure, kind of cross mapping them. The one thing, and this may be different, at different schools, or they may want to see it different ways, but when we did interdisciplinary lessons, they were not, would concurrent be the right word? Just because I was working on it right now doesn't mean that you were working on it right now. It may be 3 weeks before you actually get to it, because it's a process and it's a long way. So you may do your part and you kind of move on for a little bit, and then in a couple of weeks, the other class maybe gets started on theirs. And that's okay, because depending on what you're doing, sometimes you may have to actually create something before anybody else can do anything. So your job is to actually make the hardware for whatever it is that they're going to do. So you may talk about it with the other students and be like, oh, they're going to be doing this in tech ed for the next couple of weeks. And when they're done, then we're going to pick up, and it's going to be our job to do the next phase of that. And then there's other times where it may be that everybody is teaching very similar things at the same time, and everybody's referencing back to the essential question and the overarching theme that you guys have decided on. And then from there, you just kind of continue lesson planning. So the biggest part is, and Mr. Stoll, I know you've heard this before, but when you're talking about that UBD document, which CTE was not very familiar with, but that first section of it, it's asking them, what are the overarching themes that we're wanting these students to learn? What are the questions that we want them to be able to answer? And so that's what you're doing, basically. And those are kind of the different things that maybe you haven't done before, because you're not trying to think about how can my students think holistically about my topic. I just see my standard and I go from there. But then after you've identified kind of those overarching cross-curricular components. The rest of it's just the same as normal. Like, here's my lessons, here's what I'll need to be doing, here's what I need to teach them, and then going from there. So when you're talking about a problem-based learning unit, it'll look a little bit different because you would lesson plan differently than if you were just doing a traditional, I'm going to teach them this and we're going to practice that. But it's still kind of the general concept. I'm going to come with my overarching idea. I'm going to get that together, and all of us are going to, at the beginning of this unit, we're going to write it big across the board. This is the question, or this is the problem that we want answered or solved by the end of this unit. And then every time a kid goes into a different class, they see the same question, but they're learning different components to help answer the question. Does that make sense? So, and I didn't put this on there because honestly, I thought it was more, I guess, common sense. But the whole point of doing, or not the whole point, but a major point of doing problem-based learnings, of doing STEM, of doing interdisciplinary, is to definitely hit on those 21st century skills and really drill into the students the importance of critical thinking. And I think that was years ago, kind of realized that this was a gap that the students were starting to have, or, students entering into the workforce, is they can't think. It's like, I'm staring at this and I know that there's a problem, but I don't know the steps to figure out the problem. And so doing problem-based type learnings and giving them a problem and actually working through and coaching them through their how to solve the problem is a skill that they're going to need and be using, for the remainder of their life. So that's definitely a major part of the STEM and the PBL based learning. All right, I'm going to pause for just a second. We've got 8 minutes left. The next part was really trying to work through more of actually helping you guys start developing a problem-based lesson. I'm not sure if we want to do that today. So how do you guys feel about what we talked about when we were talking? Do you kind of have some thoughts of like, oh, this is what I teach and I could involve these people?
Yeah, I think this would be something that I could put in my 6th grade for the introduction to agriculture, especially getting some other encore teachers involved. I know I was talking with the health teachers of maybe growing some plants and then coming up with a nutritional meal with them.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually, so the what I was going to talk to you guys about, which it's still going to be a discussion. So the ones that didn't come, they didn't get a free pass, because this is something that we as a district, with that, is it the farm? I'm going to get it wrong. It's that farm to table grant, though. That's not what it's called. You guys have the farm bot. So all of the STEM schools have that farm bot. And so when we were talking, I was like, that's a perfect interdisciplinary lesson. Tech Ed could own building the farm bot. Everybody thinks like, oh, the word farm, then it's definitely going to be agriculture. But really, the farm bot is a technological system. And that's not agriculture. Now, when you think about it from like, what do people think about different areas? When you're thinking agriculture, oh, it's like farm animals and plants. That's it. But agriculture is very technologically advanced these days. But Tech Ed teaches technological systems, and that's what the farm bot is. So we had talked about, Tech Ed kind of owning the building and the designing and making sure that the farm bot is put together, and then the agricultural classes would be the ones deciding on the plants, where they're going to be planted, keeping up with it, making, checking on them, which the farm bot does all of that stuff for you. That's kind of the point of it. But, just kind of the overall growing of the produce. The computer science classes can take the farm bot, and I'm kind of like skipping all of the next parts of it. Of the PD that I had, but talking about the computer science, they would actually code it and telling the farm bot what's going to go where and everything else. So there's the coding component of the farm bot. So then you actually have produce. So what do we do with the produce then? So why not sell it? Why not have a little fundraiser for the CTE department or for the school as a whole? So if you're going to sell something, what do you need to do, Mr. Soul? Probably
Advertise.
Market it. Okay. So, and also when you're talking about the farm bot, going back and not just talking about marketing and advertisement, but there's going to be data that goes along with the farm bot. So it's going to tell you, I did this to this plant at this time, this needed this amount of water, and things like that. So there's data, and with data, you can always turn it into some sort of a spreadsheet. And so then you've got your Excel part of your courses that you teach as well. And so, I was trying to think about all the different content areas and maybe not be able to hit every single class that you teach, but every single teacher that we have. So you've got the advertisement part of it. You also have where you could create a flyer, like an informational thing explaining what the farm bot is, and doing more of an informational type product. And then you've got the Excel spreadsheet data component too. And then I know you guys don't have this class, but CC Griffin has family and consumer sciences, which Caleb, you were just talking about with your health teachers, helping you guys talk about the plants, and then the health teachers talking about the nutritional aspect of that. And FACS also does that. So having those students come up with the nutritional value of the plants and the produce that we're producing, and then having them create different types of diets, maybe, a well-balanced, not a diet, using the ingredients to create a recipe that would be, well balanced, or you could give them all kinds of scenarios and they would create recipes, and they could even create at the end of it like a little recipe book. That was kind of the last part of the PD, was we were going to kind of start planning that and talking through that. But we have the farm bot, I say we, I don't have the farm bot, but you guys have the farm bot. It's there in a box. It's not been put together yet. But there's no reason why the CTE department and more, I'm not even, you can pull in band, and this is why I had said this earlier, you can pull in band and chorus, and they can create, the music for it. They can create a jingle that goes along with it. You can pull in social studies when you're talking about sustainability. You can pull in science because you're talking about like the impact that the global warming component of it, making sure that we're being able to replenish the resources that we're using. So that's definitely science. So, and math, like it's got to calculate how much it needs, how much it's using, how much fertilizer. So, you can pull in with just one piece of equipment, a handful, more than a handful of content areas that could actually hit on a part of this. So that was kind of where I was wanting to go with you guys. One, to make sure that farm bot is being used, because it's an amazing product, and the kids will absolutely love it. But if all it's being used for is to look cool and the awe factor, then we're missing a major piece of how this could be part of the STEM schools. And so that was kind of where we were going to go. And like I said, it'll definitely be a larger discussion later on when we can try to get all of you guys together again. So what are your thoughts? Oh, hey, Mr. Call, I didn't see you pop on. I had my screen up.
I think it'd be something that we could really get started maybe in August of next year. Maybe having the tech ed class build the farm bot, because it's sitting in the greenhouse right now. I think there's one arm that's built. Other than that, it's still in the box.
Okay, so yours is going to be housed in the greenhouse?
Either that or right outside. I do have the raised bed right beside the greenhouse. Mm-hmm. So I was going to see if it could fit that raised bed. The only thing then would be a power supply and water supply, but
yeah, and the grant should cover that.
Yeah,
that could have been a lie. I don't know. I'm gonna take a screenshot for attendance purposes. So yeah, and it's, I know teaching this year has been the probably most stressful year that you guys have had. So I don't diminish that in any way, or try to say like, oh, we've got to start making plans, because I know you guys are overwhelmed in a lot of different aspects. But I do think that this is something when you're, thinking about holistically and thinking about not helping, but giving the students an experience. This is one of the things that could be.
Sorry.
No, you're good. This can definitely be something where the students are seeing something that's a really cool technological advancement that's being made, seeing how they've created it. And if I would have showed you the video, you would get all this, seeing how they've created it to actually, most businesses are out there to try to make money and they're not out there to try to help the customer. The FarmBot situation is the total opposite of that. It's trying to give people the tools to be able to sustain, their own food supply. And they give it to you, like you buy the FarmBot and then the platform that it's run off of is completely free. And they give you the ability and the autonomy to be able to create your own pieces that would attach to the FarmBot. And then the coding that would go along with making sure that that one worked properly with the system. So it's a really cool product that you guys have. And I know, if it's in the fall when we kind of talk about this, I know the STEM coaches have been talking with Leanne, and I've been a little bit of the part of the discussions, but I think they're trying to get them put in sooner than later to where they're actually assembled, or the beds are created or whatever, because they've got to like run on a track or something. But anyway, so definitely a discussion for later on, maybe a discussion that holds off until next year, but definitely something I'd like for you guys at least to start thinking about, and even just kind of having some small chats about, and then we'll come back together and really try to, and if this was something all of the schools could do and you guys are all doing the same lesson plan, the same interdisciplinary plan, that'd be pretty cool. So anyway, I'm gonna stop because I know you guys probably have duty to get to. You guys have any questions?
No, thank you.
All right, I'm gonna put I don't think Mr. Call missed the link to the slide, but I'm gonna put it back in the chat, and then hopefully we can kind of continue this discussion later on. But I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no, I had I have the link, so thank you. No worries
Okay.
about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Y'all have a good one.
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.